Your Words Destroyed My Planet, the stream series, the edited version. Originally streamed live at twitch.tv/dualitiesdownfall. More information in the description. For Your Words Destroyed My Planet. Chapter 29. Trollian is a really interesting program. It's open source and really customizable. Solix has things set between the two of you, so you can always message him whenever and it'll alert him. The most widely used version of Trollian has a similar feature. You can select another person or several people in your contacts and allow them to push an alert to your devices, even if they're in sleep mode or on silent. You both agree to use the feature responsibly, and you're both aware that it's on. Either party can remove permission, although the other person is alerted when that happens. It's typically used for quadrants or families in an emergency. Parents often have it set up with their children. You have this feature on with your closest friends, and of course with Gamzee. You've only got one of these important alerts once in your life before now, when Matuna was taken. You always hope to never get one again, but you're rudely awakened an hour before your normal alarm with your palm husk screeching at you, and across the hive you can hear your tablet wheeling the same alert out, along with your watch right by your head. Gamzee isn't here, so you're alone when you scramble upright in terror and grab your palm husk. Come to the emergency room. There's been an incident with Hal. Shit, I'm on my way. Terror and a million awful possibilities grip your soul, and just like that, Signless appears at your side with a surprised look on his face. Hal's in the hospital. I gotta go, you say in horror. Oh no, do you know why? Signless asks, but you shake your head. You don't know anything yet. You leap out of bed, change as fast as you possibly can, grab your ID, and sprint out of the front door. You get to the train station in record time, and from there it's 15 minutes until you're at the hospital. As you rush into the emergency room, you make for the desk right away, but spot Kanaya in the distance behind the desk. With a hasty explanation, you scurry around and rush to her side. All the while, Signless is floating along behind you. You didn't know what you were going to see when you got here. You didn't know what's happened to Hal or what's going on. What you do see is Hal's entire family, barring Dave, of course, all clustered around the edge of the room with worried looks on their faces. Terezi is at June's side, and she turns in your direction as you rush in, her blank red eyes seeming to see right through you, even though you know they can't. Karkat, you made it! Kanaya sighs in relief. Is everyone gonna be here? You hear Hal's voice behind a screened-off area at the end of the room. Mr. Egbert looks around the curtain at the end of the room to see you and gives you a somewhat stressed, if still polite, smile. What happened? You ask Kanaya quietly. It's Dirk who answers you. He's standing at the edge of the room, positioned so he can see outside and see Hal at the same time. His whole body is tense, his fingers tight on his arms and indenting his sleeves. He was at work early, working on something. His computer blew up in his face, Dirk says, his voice tight. How could... Oh no, your virus did that to a few Husktops before, and Solix caught it before you did serious damage. The Striders were going to use a modified version of your virus to distribute all of your information when the time came, but they said they'd stripped it free of its most dangerous parts. I don't know how this happened, Roxy says, and you get the feeling she's been repeating that to herself for a while. Pretty impressive, considering that machines like that shouldn't be able to do that, though I've heard of it before, Terezi says, her attention laser-focused on you. Don't, please, June says to her, and Terezi looks away from you, though you doubt she's dropped the matter. Signless slips through the curtain, unseen, and then comes back through a few moments later. It's probably not that bad. He looks pretty rough, but it seems like it's mostly a lot of nicks and bruising on skin that tends to bleed a lot. Head wounds always bleed like crazy, Signless says, although he looks uncomfortable, and you see him absently run his hands through his hair and over the edges of his face. Right, he actually had to hide his blood, didn't he? It probably makes him uncomfortable, even more so given that human blood is really close in color to your own. They've taken some scans to work out if it's anything serious, and they should be back by now. I should just... Jane starts irritably, but Rose cuts her off. We can't treat family. You definitely can't when there are other doctors around and he's stable, Rose reminds her. Jane grits her teeth but stays put. You can't imagine how hard it is for her to literally stand by and do nothing when her brother is hurt. How is he, though? You ask quietly. A lot of superficial lacerations, bruising here and there. There's some shrapnel, though, and that's what's concerning. They took a few scans to make sure that it's safe to remove, and they won't do damage by taking it out. That's what we're waiting on. It's also why he's a little loopy on painkillers right now, Jane explains. Excuse me, a familiar voice says behind you, making you jump. You whirl around to come face to pectoral with Equius. Equius! You exclaim, about to ask him why he's here too, until you remember that he's a doctorist as well. Do you have his scans? Jane asks. I do, if I may, Mr. Egbert. Equius asks as he comes over to the seat by the bed that Mr. Egbert is sitting on. Of course. Do you want me to get him up? He was upright earlier, but he slumped over a little bit, Mr. Egbert asks. Equius nods, and Mr. Egbert moves. You hear movement behind the screen, and Hal's mumbled protests. Equius sits down on the little swivel chair and pulls a tablet out of the inside of his lab coat. He gives Hal a professional smile, not that you can see Hal from your point of view. Hello, Mr. Strider, he says. Oh, hi. Hey, you can call me Hal, Hal says, in a tone that is both clearly under the influence and also weirdly intense. Hal, hello, I'm Equius Zahak. I'll be your doctorist for this, Equius says patiently. Cool, good, Do I know you? I feel like if I'd met you, I'd remember you. Hi, Hal says, almost giddily, and holds out his hand. Equius shakes his hand ever so carefully, but you can still hear Hal gasp. Wow, that's a strong handshake you got there, Doc. Hal laughs. Oh no. You look at Dirk, his face is frozen in a picture of horror and mortification. Roxy is biting her lip impossibly hard in her failed attempt to keep a straight face. Oh, dear, I do apologize if that was too strong, Equius says, entirely oblivious. I was definitely not complaining, Hal says gleefully. Roxy doubles over, her hands over her face as she desperately tries to keep her laughter silent. Jin's got her hand over her mouth, and her shoulders are shaking in barely repressed amusement. We haven't met in a professional capacity, but I am your brother's eye specialist, and I did go to school in the same year group as him. Your younger sisters, Karkat, Terezi, Kanaya, Solux, and so on. I'm sure we have passed one another before, Equius explains helpfully. Oh, wow. Hal sighs a little dreamily. You look at Kanaya helplessly. How is this happening? I would say it is the painkillers, and we should be understanding, Kanaya says under her breath. Nope, I remember Dirk around Jake. June hisses at you two, not quietly enough to stop Dirk shooting her a sharp look, though. Meanwhile, Equius has moved on to actual medical matters, since that's what he's actually here for. We're worried that perhaps your nerves could have been affected since it was so close to your eye. However, your reflexes seem to have saved you, your left palm taking the worst of the debris, and your blink reflex protecting your actual eye. I will certainly remove everything else for you now, since I can be strongly confident that I won't cause any deeper damage, Equius explains. Anything you want, Hal agrees. I think my son means that we trust your judgment here. I've already agreed to take the day off to look after him, since the pain medicine seems to have had some effect, Mr. Egbert says patiently. That's not uncommon, and given that Dave can be a little sensitive to some analgesics, I am not completely surprised, but I will change his prescription to something I suspect will work better if he is anything like Dave. I will also write out the regimen for aftercare for you, so Hal can reference it later when he feels a little better. Equius nods. Hal is giggling to himself, and you're not sure exactly what Equius said that made him do that, but Knowing the Strider family penchant for innuendo, both deliberate and accidental, you're going to guess alternative meanings for either sensitive or aftercare made him react that way. You're immensely glad that either Equius is oblivious to this or that he's an absolute professional. You have to stand there as Equius very carefully treats Hal, removing bits of his blown-up machine from his skin, all while Hal asks him a million questions. Not medical questions or concerns about how he's going to recover. Nope, not that. Hal's asking him personal questions, the kind of get-to-know-you questions you might ask a first date. What made you decide to go into medicine? How long have you been a doctorist? Have you got any quadrants? And even more inappropriately, questions about how much he works out to get a physique like that. This seems to be Dirk's personal hell, and that makes you wonder just how true June's accusation about Dirk being just like this around Jake was. In fairness to Dirk, he would have been a lot younger when he met Jake, and in fairness to Hal, he's clearly loopy from the pain medication, and probably the adrenaline from nearly being blown up. Also, they're both Striders, so really there's only so much one can ask when it comes to behaving like a normal person. Equius finishes removing shards of things from Hal and carefully cleans the wounds, applying healing patches where they're needed and salve on the ones that remain. He clears up his supplies and gets up to face Mr. Egbert. I will go get you his prescriptions and write you out the healthcare advice and link you to some useful information about these types of injuries, Equius tells him. Thank you. We really appreciate it, Mr. Egbert says gratefully. Equius nods and leaves the room. You catch sight of Hal leaning around the curtain to stare after Equius as he goes. His face doesn't look as bad as you feared it might. There's patches of his skin that are already swollen and bruising. The worst part is a sizable gash through his right eyebrow, which is now sutured back together and covered with a translucent healing patch. It's pretty clear that it was the worst injury, and there's a good deal of blood matting in his hair on that side. You'd be shocked if that didn't scar. The rest of his face is dotted here and there with scrapes and shallow wounds that are now either under small healing patches or shiny with some kind of dermal healing salve. His left eye is unmarred with scratches, but is blatantly well on the way to being an impressive black eye. It's only when you see how much his left hand is bandaged that you realize that throwing his hand up to protect himself must have led to the blast of his exploding machine forcing his hand into his face hard enough to have made him more or less punch himself. Thankfully, Hal's hand doesn't seem to be hurting too badly, since he's holding the edge of the screen with it so he can stare after Equius. All things considered, Hal clearly got off lightly. Fuck, this was never supposed to happen again. You don't know how your virus managed to do this again. Wow, I hate to see him go, but I could watch him leave all day, Hal says gleefully. Holy shit, could you not? Dirk hisses at him. I couldn't not. Did you see his muscles? Not just his upper body, but all over. Hal gasps. Jane, I'm dying, Roxy wheezes. That man could crush my head between his thighs and I'd thank him, Hal whispers, probably not as quietly as he thinks. Yes, we get the picture, son, Mr. Egbert sighs. Rose, why did you never introduce me to your hot friend? Hal hisses at Rose. I suspect that if you think very carefully about why me and June never considered Equius a hot friend to introduce you to, you might have your answer, Rose says diplomatically. Fine, but when I see Dave, I'm punching him for not introducing me to his hot doctor, Hal grumbles. Dave also wouldn't find Equius attractive, though, you point out. He's not blind anymore, thanks to hot doctor man, Hal says, clearly losing his own train of thought. You look around, trying to keep an eye out for Equius returning, so you can try to make sure that Hal isn't still yelling about exactly how much he's into Equius. You do catch sight of Terezi, grinning ear to ear, her palm husk subtly held behind her folded arms so that the camera is pointing right at Hal. You'd bet money she's filming this to show Dave later, or maybe to mortify Hal with in the future. When you turn your attention back to Hal, he's leaning against his dad, his head resting on Mr. Egbert's now not totally white dress shirt. You can catch Hal mumbling about Equius being pretty, but also about his face hurting. The reminder that Hal is actually hurt here and not just weirdly into Aqueous is enough to take the levity off of the moment.
You wrote that original virus.
You knew it could blow up machines, even if no one ever worked out how. Solix stopped your virus in its tracks and covered for you so you didn't get into incredible amounts of trouble. Solix defeating your virus and proving that you never actually intended to send it to anyone saved your ass and got him his job. So how did it suddenly do this again? Hal, Dirk, and Roxy reworked it to be safe to use for your project. They're all tech geniuses, so how did this even happen? You certainly can't ask any of that right here and now.
We should watch a movie tonight at Dad's place to keep Hal company,
Rose says in very careful sentences.
That sounds like a good idea.
You agree. Mr. Egbert helps Hal over towards the rest of you, and without the imminent prospect of Aqueous, he doesn't seem so happy now. But he is, as Silas said, mostly fine. He looks at you, and despite the surrounding cuts and bruises, his actual eyes are fine. No serious damage done. Thank fuck. I'm so sorry, you apologize. Hal makes a face that's mostly a grimace, but reaches out and pats your head between your horns. It's not you. You're good, Hal mumbles.
Your eye looks really...
Rose can't quite finish her sentence.
We should really be getting to work. I just realized that.
Kanaya announces suddenly and grabs you with one hand and Terezi with the other. Without another word, she pulls you both out of the divided room and out of the emergency room entirely. As soon as you're outside, she lets you both go, and you watch Terezi take a second to straighten out her uniform and settle her hands on her dragon-headed white cane.
That was probably a good idea,
Terezi says.
I would like to be in there supporting Rose, but it was pretty clear that it was a family matter. It has been quite some time since any of them have seen one of their siblings badly hurt, and without the distraction of Aqueous, that was probably a lot.
Kanaya sighs.
Shit, I didn't think about how much that'd bring back for them.
You whisper guiltily. They probably didn't either, but the associations your mind makes aren't always sensible. Trauma is like that. Silas agrees, though obviously only you can hear him. You nod anyway, but it probably looks like you're nodding along with your own thoughts to anyone else nearby.
It sounds like he's not that badly hurt after all, despite all the blood when he was first brought in. I don't mind being blind, but other people aren't fans of suddenly being blind,
Terezi says with a shrug.
You weren't thrilled the day you lost your sight either,
you point out. Terezi's accident is another thing you don't talk about much, but your point still stands, and Terezi inclines her head a little as if to acknowledge your point.
Hopefully things will be a little better by this evening, and we can talk to him then,
Kanaya says, starting to walk away from the hospital with you and Terezi following behind.
Indeed,
Terezi says with a sharp smile.
I feel like this is all my fault,
you say miserably. You feel that way a lot, Kanaya points out.
She's not wrong, but hey.
I need to go this way. I'll see you tonight, Kanaya says, pointing the other way.
Right. See you then. Thanks for telling me to be here. It was the right call,
you assure Kanaya, who nods and then leaves to get to work. You check your watch. You'd be early to work if you go there now, but not so early that there's any point in going home. You're dressed enough for work. You can probably try to brush your hair with your claws, and you've got gum in your desk. That'll do. You turn to look at Terezi, to tell her that you are also going to leave, only to come almost nose to nose with her. She's leaning right into your space, her bright red eyes wide, her smile sharp and fixed in place. She breathes in deeply.
You stink,
she says, in a way that definitely comes across as threatening.
I didn't shower,
you manage to say.
Of guilt,
Terezi adds.
You once said that I was the most guilty, innocent person you've ever met,
you point out.
I did say that, but you do smell guilty right now,
she says, and stares at you unblinkingly. She can't see, so how can she still stare at you like that? Before Dave went all cybernetic, he was never able to stare at you like that. Sure, he could look at you and his expression conveyed that he could metaphorically see right through you, but that's nothing on the way Terezi's stare peels you back layer by layer until it's like she's reading the writing on your goddamn soul. Well, I should get to work, you announce, and Terezi stamps her cane on the floor. You're not sticking around for that, so you turn, take one step, and immediately end up in a heap on the floor. A few people outside the hospital are staring at you now, which isn't surprising, given that you went from being an innocent pedestrian to a heap of troll on the floor. As you roll over and sit up, you spot the cause of your rude reintroduction to the ground. Terezi's cane is pinning your shoelace to the floor. As smooth and seamless as flowing water, Terezi crouches down and leans into your space, one sharp hand coming to rest on your shoulder. You are friends with her, right? Can you give me some kind of sign if you need me to do something? Not that I know what I could do, Signless says worriedly from the side.
June has told me some things. Enough to not put me in a position where my professional ethics come into play, but I can figure out the shape of what's going on. Speaking of crimes that are not and were not ever fully outlined, I only know of one virus that blew up machines like that. One that would make you specifically feel guilty. I know Solix covered things up for you with that, and with my advice you were able to come out of that fine, only it's suddenly happening again, Terezi says quietly.
You falter. Terezi's stare is unwavering. I don't know how this happened, you say.
This being what, exactly?
She asks, not letting you get away with being vague.
The explosion. I don't know how that happened. I wouldn't try to hurt anyone. You know me.
You insist.
That I absolutely believe. Have you been making your terrible viruses again? She asks.
No, you know I'm awful at it, you tell her.
I wasn't arguing against that, that's for sure.
Terezi snorts, wounding what little pride you have left. At least it matches the rest of you after your spectacular fall.
I don't know what June told you, but you know me. Come on, Terezi, you know me. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, I'm trying to help people. Hal was never meant to get hurt, and I have no idea what went wrong that this happened, and I feel awful about it.
You insist. Terezi breathes in deeply and sighs, closing her eyes for a moment and freeing you from that unending stare. You chance a look at a very unsettled Signless before going back to Terezi.
June said that something is going on, something important. That some very big and important laws are being broken and deep wrongs are going on, but if I was involved, it would involve me breaking laws, so she's keeping me out of it now, for my sake. I don't like that, but June doesn't underestimate me,
Terezi says slowly and very quietly indeed, so no one could overhear you at all.
Tell me, Karkat,
Terezi says in her unusually quiet tone.
How likely is it that law enforcement will be coming after you?
That's a hell of a question. Ideally, this whole information leak goes out at the end of the week and everyone finds out what's been going on and no one can trace anything to any of you. But ideally, not at all. I'm not exactly an optimist, though. I'm prepared for the consequences if it comes to that. You tell her, lifting your chin defiantly. I appreciate the attitude. It's still better not to get caught. Speaking from personal experience, Signless says. Yeah, he would definitely know about that.
This is a very big ship, but it's a contained and finite space. We always find people eventually. But sometimes it's harder if someone was to stick out of view of the cameras, or to hide their appearance, or to... Give me your palm husk, Terezi says, making a grabby gesture with her hand. You scramble for your palm husk and hold it out to her, but she doesn't take it, just taps at the screen. Sometimes, if someone is very smart, there are certain settings hidden in the palm husk that can stop us tracking them,
Terezi says slowly, and ticks through various options, disabling specific features as she goes.
People don't do that, of course, because it means they can't message people and they'd have to turn it back on,
Terezi says, and goes through the whole process back again. Right, of course. You nod.
You had better be sure about this,
Terezi says.
Isn't it? If you had to choose between being legally in the right the whole time and trying to right a huge injustice, what would you do? Ideally both, but if you had to choose.
You ask her, holding your palm husk to your chest as you talk.
The law's role is to serve justice. Legality can be murky, and trials can be full of legal technicality, and though I love to win with the exact letter of the law, I like to think that it is justice that I serve. I'm not someone who writes the laws, and when I see that a law is not working as it should, I say so, but it's not my role to change it. That's your ancestors' domain. It requires oversight and deliberation, and I don't do that. So I follow the law as it is written. But in very rare occasions, there is something that is criminal no matter what the law says, because it is unjust. And in those situations, sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make a delicious, righteous, lawful omelet.
Terezi says, and smiles sharply at you.
Then you understand me. This isn't playtime. This isn't teenage self-righteousness. You're not playing murder mystery games, and I'm not getting on a soapbox about nothing. This is real for both of us.
You nod.
In that case, I can't wait to find out what's going to happen.
Terezi grins. She hauls you to your feet, one-handed, with upsettingly little effort, too. Just as you're about to step back, she claps you on the shoulder again.
And, Karkat, she says thoughtfully, if for some reason I was involved in looking for you, I'm sure it wouldn't be hard for me to do, since I can smell your guilty sweat stink from across the ship. But, you know, it might be hard for me to see you. It's terribly hard being blind, you know.
Without so much as a goodbye, Terezi walks off, though she still whaps you in the shin with her cane as she goes. She is far more terrifying than I thought she'd be. All I knew about her before was that she licked things in her hive. I wasn't prepared for that. Are you all right? Signless asks you, floating around so you can see him. I'm fine. We're friends, even if it doesn't look like it. You mutter as you dust yourself off. You could easily be mumbling to yourself. Well, that was a hell of a start to your day. You get the feeling that you're not really going to know all that much about what just happened to Hal until this evening, and until then you're just going to marinate in your own guilt. With Terezi and Kanaya both gone, you walk to the train station on your own. You don't have long to wait, and when you get on the train, you stand instead of sitting. Goodness knows you'll be at your desk all day, so you may as well stand now. Briefly, you look over the screens above the seats. They usually rotate between showing adverts for businesses on the ship, community notices about events, and information about the ship itself. A few notices about routine maintenance in various areas scroll past, the upper midship mall being inaccessible from the aft side for a few hours next week, and the area of the park where Father died is still off limits. It doesn't say it like that, but that's what it means. You raise an eyebrow at a very vague mention of lighting problems that maintenance is looking into, and you can't help but notice the distracting banner ad that quickly rolls across the bottom of the screen in an effort to draw your eye away from any mention of problems at all. Pay no attention to the ghostly problems. Look at the animated basketball telling you about upcoming games. Real subtle. Does everything feel a little bit off to you? Signless asks after a moment. You look over at him right as the train rushes into a tunnel. There are plenty of tunnels on the ship, places where train lines wrap around the backs of buildings or go through the closed-in structure of the ship. It's normal. If anyone had asked you how long the tunnels are, you're not sure you could say. You've never thought about it. Evidently, you do know in some respect, because you get the very odd sensation that this tunnel has gone on for too long. Around you, all of the lights surge brighter and brighter. The light reflects off of the windows in the train, off of the poles and the glass dividers inside the train in a way that doesn't make sense. It reflects, and somehow reproduces to get lighter still. Every surface is getting brighter and brighter. You clap your hands to your face, and as quietly as you can, you stumble over a song. You're not sure you know the name to it, some nursery rhyme or something that you learned in preschool. Why your mind would go to that, of all things, you don't know, but as you quietly sing your song, you feel Signless get brighter and somehow more real. He's looking around the train carriage, just like you are, at the endless tunnel behind the glass. As you look at it, you realize that the walls of the tunnel are black, but you can barely see them through the glare from the lights. A feeling stirs over you with terrible certainty. If you lose sight of the dark of the tunnel beyond that window, then you'll never see anything ever again. Signless jumps up and slams his hands into the strip lights along the train, not bursting the bulb in a flare of light, but somehow shorting them out entirely. The train is pitched into darkness, and you hear people down the train yelp in alarm, and then, just like that, a station rushes into view outside the windows, and the train glides to a halt as if nothing ever happened. You drop your hands from your face, though they're trembling. People around you get up and move to get off the train as others get on. Some of them are looking at the lights warily, but since they're back to working as normal, they brush it off. One guy walks past you, muttering about his palm husk playing up, and that's it. The doors close again, and your journey continues uneventfully. That felt really different. That felt like when we were outside that sailor bar, Signless says. You fumble for your palm husk and start typing. That was fucked up. True, but did it not feel different to you? Were you doing something? Signless asks. I was singing some stupid preschool song as quiet as I possibly could. It's like all other music went out of my head and that's all I had. I guess that was us balancing, but it felt weirdly connected to you, not like the last time. Last time? Signless asks. I did the balance thing in the shower. I don't remember that, Signless says. Well, yeah, I wasn't exactly gonna pull you in the room to watch me stand there naked in the shower and sing, was I? For a start, there's nothing wrong with nakedness. I'm hardly mortified by other people's nudity. Secondly, you don't have anything that I've not seen before, and given that you're my descendant, you've not got anything that I've not had on my own body, Signless points out. Why is this a conversation that I'm having? Why? I'm moving the fuck on. I felt oddly connected to you this time, and I think you're right that it was similar when we were outside the bar. That doesn't seem strange. Reader did say that the benefit you get from having me around is a connection to the void. So, if you need me nearby to make this work, that would make sense. Signless points out. Yeah, I guess. You're about to write more when you suddenly realize that you're at your stop, and you just make it through the doors in time to get off at that station. Signless simply stays put and lets the train pull through him before drifting to the platform and standing next to you. I really wish we had more help with this, Signless says, following you as you start to walk off. You raise your palm husk to your ear like you're on a call. This way, at least you can talk to Signless, even if you have to be careful about what you're saying, in case you're overheard. We've just gotta hold on until they get back. It'll be a week, or whatever. Until then, we can figure it out, you say, with grim resignation. It's getting worse. What would have happened if we weren't on that train just now? Signless asks, though you're pretty sure he knows as well as you do what would have happened. I think it would have gone, you say vaguely. The lights keep going wrong, and people just feel different, twitchier, more paranoid. I'm pretty used to reading the mood of a place, and I have to say, if this ship was a town we'd come across, I wouldn't stop. This place feels like a powder keg, Signless tells you. Oh, what? You ask. Signless gets that look he gets sometimes where he said something that's outdated for the Alternian you speak, or referencing something on a planet you've never been to. Like a bomb is going to go off. It's as if everyone's aware of it and we're trying to defuse it without any instructions, Signless says, and he's not entirely wrong. If you have any suggestions, I'm all ears, you say. Signless's shoulders slump as he steps into an elevator with you. Obviously, he doesn't know what the two of you should be doing any more than you do. The situation is dire, and you're running on very little guidance here. You're just doing the best that you can. What happened to Hal might not have been your fault, Signless says after a moment. What do you mean? You ask, making sure not to look at Signless at all, and instead acting like you're focusing on the call that you're definitely having. The other people in the elevator pay you no mind, thankfully. I mean that we're getting lights blowing up around the ship already. Hal is awake, or whatever term you want to use, and that might mean that the light wants to reach him more, maybe. I'm not really sure whether knowing about all of this is more or less dangerous or not, and as awful as Dr. Lalonde's work was, I think it's unwise to declare that because she and her work are awful, that everything she said was wrong. Being morally wrong doesn't mean that you're automatically factually wrong about everything. Certainly her methods were awful, but your working can be all wrong and your answer can still be right. It may well have been the void that blew his screen up, or other ghosts on the ship, not your virus, Silas says. You glance at him. He's leaning against the wall of the elevator, giving you a sympathetic look. I'm responsible for both of those things, though. Whichever it was doesn't really change things when it comes to me being responsible for it or not, you counter. Silas gives you the kind of look that you've given Cancri before, and you're sure he's given you. Namely, that he's frustrated at how obtuse you're being. On top of that, though, is the irritated recognition that he can be the same, and oh, fuck, is this how other people feel when they talk to him? It's whatever the counterpart to do as I say, not as I do is. Don't do that. What do you mean I also do that? And also, forgive others, forgive yourself, unless you're me, in which case, fuck you. You should make a Ventus line crest and motto, except it's an infinite loop of screaming. Maybe if someone invents that ghost trolleyan that June was talking about, then you, Cancri, and Silas can go to therapy together. Maybe with Rose, if she does something particularly heinous to warrant being put through that. You have bigger problems right now than your inherited neuroses, and you figure Silas thinks the same, since he doesn't push you further. You hang up your fake call and walk through the door to your department. There's a stressed-out-looking troll from maintenance on a stepladder replacing a light, with a couple of your coworkers watching her. Not that that surprises you, because when your choice is between filling paperwork and watching pretty much anything else, you'll choose that. You're sure there's a joke there about how many HR employees it takes to change a light bulb, but you're not making it. You've got your hand on the door handle to your office when you overhear your coworker in the office next to you. Working at all. I tried to use my tablet instead, and it stopped. Well, that's very sad, but I'm sorry, but I didn't send one of your engineers to another planet and put the other in the hospital. Hello? Hello? Unbelievable. He slams his phone down, and you go right into your office. Some people, honestly, like, oh, sorry, one of our engineers is stuck risking his life on an ice planet to save lives, and another had a husk top blow up in his face this morning. Sorry, your tech support will have to wait a little. How backwards can your priorities be? You close your office door behind you and sit down at your desk with a sigh. Silas leans against your desk with a troubled expression set into his semi-translucent features. I still have a weird feeling. I'm going to have a look around the ship and see if I can see anything amiss, he says finally. Beyond what's been amiss recently, you mean? You ask. Yeah, I suppose. Something just feels wrong. I feel it in my bones, Silas says, and then seems to think about that for a second. Which I guess don't exist anymore, he adds with a frown. Unless Disciple has them stored away somewhere, but if she has, she never told me. Though I'm not sure how you'd lead into that conversation, especially when I was little, you say, looking away from your Husktop screen, flickering to life, to face Silas properly. You say that, but she was never really squeamish with that stuff. I remember she hunted an antler beast for us once. She cooked what we could eat and then smoked the rest of it so we had food for when we traveled. She'd skin it for leather for clothing repairs or trading, and then she scooped its think sponge out and used its think pan as a weird little puppet. Sai was off doing something and walked into the cave to her doing this like a kid's puppet show routine with it. His face was just... Silas trails off a little. It hurts to see his amused expression as he tells that anecdote slip off his face into a deep and endless pool of sadness and loss. Disciple's really old, and she moved on, though you know she never forgot or stopped loving Silas and Psionic. Psionic is long dead and gone, thanks to what was no doubt a horrific end, and Silas is dead but still here, alone. Hey, What do you say to that? You know I'm really grateful that I can talk to you, right? I wish I could be more help, Signless says. No, I'm not talking about the balancing thing or working out what's going on right now. I mean that I never thought I'd get to know you. Disciple always talked about you, but obviously she was remembering you after years, and she loved you. You did heroic stuff, but it's a big thing to live up to. I'm really grateful that I get to actually talk to you, and that Cancri can too. I know things are fucked up right now, but when it's not just you and me trying to fix everything by ourselves, things can be better. You're not just a thing I'm using to do this. You try to find a word, but you know this is coming out all clunky and wrong. No doubt Signless or Cancri could say this better, could be clearer in what they mean. Thank you, Karkat, Signless says softly, his expression a lot less, haunted now. Signless nods to himself, takes a deep breath that he doesn't need, and walks around your desk. He puts a hand on your shoulder that you can both feel and not quite feel at the same time. I'll be back, he says, and like that, he vanishes through the wall. You try to get on with your work and not think about the train ride this morning, how you felt so completely on the edge of something, a hair's breadth from no return. You can't do anything about it. You barely know how balancing works. You know how to make a connection, but you're not sure you're doing it right, or if you need Signless involved or on board. Does he have to be there? If so, how close? Can he just not help? Presumably he can, if GHB is screwing things up for Gamzee. God, Gamzee, that's a whole other problem you can't help. You can't ask him to tell you what's wrong, because you know he can't say, and even if he did, you don't know if you could feign ignorance well enough to keep yourself out of trouble. So instead, you work on HR problems. You answer questions and advise people, you clear your way through your inbox, you set people up for new roles and forward information about accommodations people are going to need in their new jobs. It's kind of nice to think that even though your life is in chaos, there's someone out there who is just trying to start a new job, who's thinking about making a good impression with their new coworkers. A knock on your door rouses you from your work at lunchtime. Before you can say anything, the door opens and Rose sticks her head around it to look at you. I need your input with a social work case, Rose says, the falter almost imperceptible, but you know her enough to catch it. You take a moment to rummage in your desk for some fruit that hopefully hasn't started petrifying and is still edible. You successfully retrieve an apple and get up. Sure, you nod and bite into your apple. May as well help and eat lunch at the same time. Rose leads the way out of your department and across to her office. She closes the door behind you and flicks on a white noise machine. To your relief, it's not static, but rain noise. We have a problem, Rose says as she turns to face you. You chew your mouthful of apple in a way that you hope conveys that this is not news to you, and Rose needs to be more specific. Rose moves past you to her desk and turns her husktop around. It's shut at the moment, but she opens it. As soon as the screen is lifted from the keyboard half below, the machine wakes up. Your blood freezes in your veins as you instantly recognize the automated voice you all used for the video that was going to pass around the entire ship, telling everyone about the balancers, the void, all of it. You can hear it saying words you proofread. What the fuck, Rose? You yelp and swallow your half-chewed mouthful of apple rather than actually choke on it in your panic. I'm not looking at this on my work desktop. I opened an email and it started playing. All my files are messed up, and the only ones I can get into right now are those. Rose hisses at you. You stare at Rose in terror and find your fear reflected back in her own expression. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. How has this happened? You throw your apple into her trash can and lean over her desk to better see her husktop. The video allows you to window it, but you can't shut it off, no matter how many times you try to. Behind the still playing video, you can see a folder opened up with files your group put together, topics neatly separated and ordered. You try to close the folder, and to your surprise, it closes, but the moment you try to open anything else on Rose's desktop, it opens itself again, on top of whatever you had actually asked to open. You'd curse whatever idiot programmed this, but you know, at least for a large part, that idiot is you. Wait, move, Rose says, elbowing you aside as the video continues in the background. You shift aside, enough to let Rose at the husktop, and watch as she opens one of your folders of evidence. She clicks into a few things, and your blood pressure drops right through your digestion sac as you see photographs of Dave as a kid, the whole file on what was done to him, and worse still, the video files of him that Dr. Lalonde included. The video ends and closes itself, leaving you and Rose in horrified silence with the backdrop of ambient rain.
Hal must have... The virus is out already. It got to me in an email. Who knows how fast it's spreading?
Rose whispers as she stares wide-eyed at the screen.
It wasn't supposed to go out yet, and it wasn't supposed to have everything in it either. How did it have everything in it?
You hiss.
I don't know. I assume they were letting the virus reference a remote file or something. The same place we've been keeping all of this, so none of us were caught with it on our machines. They were probably going to move the things we weren't showing everyone just yet to somewhere else. I don't know. That wasn't my part of this whole thing,
Rose says helplessly. You push her hand away from the trackpad and hurriedly go looking for a file that you deeply hope isn't there. Only it is. The whole file about the Athenian Loom project, the one that shows that knowing about this stuff is dangerous. And now the whole ship is going to know that this is supposed to be dangerous. Fuck. We're fucked. We're so fucked, you say, slightly hysterically as you push away from the desk and clasp your hands in your hair.
How far has this spread already?
Rose asks you, as if you'd know.
Why are you asking me?
You shout, pacing the floor in fear.
Because this is running on your virus. How does it work? How fast would it spread?
Rose demands and grabs you by the shoulders so you can't pace. You start to say that you don't know, but Rose shakes you violently.
How does it work?
She demands.
I don't...
You start, and Rose's grip tightens, which makes you abruptly change your sentence.
Even I'm not fully sure how it works. Solix said there's stuff in there that shouldn't even work, but it does somehow. It doesn't even spread at a sensible rate. Sometimes it sits dormant in a machine for a while, and then other times it's off right away. It reproduces through contacts.
Like what, your address book? Rose asks with a frown.
Kind of. I wanted it to fuck over the things that mattered most, so it spreads through your most trolled people in Trollian, but it somehow does it in emails too. Solix said it was starting to get into social media as well. He said it was like a degrees of separation thing, like it went through social bonds, you tell her. Which means all of my family have it, Kanaya, and probably you now.
Rose groans. You bite your lip and decide that you're just going to have to tell her the horrible thought that just occurred to you.
You don't even need to open it for it to work, you begin. Oh, so it gets worse. Great, Rose says. And we're both really close friends with Jade, and Dirk's married to Jake. That's 2 degrees of separation from your husktop to the captain's. We weren't supposed to get this right away, and it wasn't meant to happen now, but if the captain hasn't already seen this, she will soon.
You whisper. Rose bites her lip for a moment and then draws in a deep breath. For a split second, you see that she's got a little bit of black lipstick transferred onto her teeth. You don't know why you're thinking about that right now when so much else is going on. Probably because so much of your mental processing power is currently devoted to panicked internal screaming, so the remaining 2% of your think sponge is left to dumbly observe things.
We need to warn the others, Rose says finally. What? No, we shouldn't do anything. Didn't we say that us acting weird when this came out would make us immediate targets of suspicion? We said we'd act normal instead of being obviously guilty, you remind her. That was before this got released early, and when Dave's information wasn't in it. It'd be perfectly normal for me to go see my family after something like that coming out.
Rose argues back. Alright, you have a point there. And if anything, Hal being out of action thanks to being in the hospital this morning is in his favor. If someone tries to question him on anything, we can just say it's the medication and shock affecting his memory, if he can't come up with an alibi or whatever. You concede.
Exactly. This whole plan is already off the rails. We need to improvise. At this point, it's improvisation or failure,
Rose says, in a way that is frankly terrifying.
This is all going wrong, but you're right. We just have to roll with it.
You sigh. About that, a voice from right behind you says, and you leap several feet in the air and curse, scrambling around to see a slightly alarmed Signless standing there.
Oh, fuck! My blood pressure!
It's Silas, we're okay. Fucking hell, you scared the shit out of me. You wheeze, with one hand held to your chest. Well, I would have knocked, but I've got a persistent case of death stopping me, Silas says dryly. Right, sorry. If you're here to tell us that the virus has got out, we know, you say, although you're still a little breathless with that sudden spike of fear you just experienced. That might explain it. I did see a lot of people looking at their devices weirdly, and a lot of digital signs not working, but no, I meant to say that things feel weird around the upper midship area, not quite as bad as the train, but I think we might want to get on that, Silas says. Wait, no. Near the council chambers, the legislation, debate, and administration departments, the area with that fountain in the middle that looks like a bird trying to drown itself? You ask in a rush. Not specifically there, but very nearby, yes, Silas says after a moment's thought. The void is getting worse near where Cancri works. It's getting worse, and I can't help but think we're the reason why. I need to deal with it, or people might get hurt, or worse, you tell Rose. It's too late to start second-guessing if we did the right thing or not, Carcat. We've got to see this through. I've got to warn people, and you've got to balance. This isn't the seamless release of information we'd planned for, but it's what we've got, Rose says firmly, and grabs her bag from the hook by the door. I just don't understand how it got out so soon, you say unhappily. I don't know either. Hopefully Hal can enlighten us. As far as I know, he followed everything Solix did when your virus got out the first time, so they knew what to take out and work on before they modified it at all. There's no time for speculating now. We should go, Rose says and opens the door. You walk out of it first, and then Rose follows and locks her office up. You quickly get on your palm husk and set yourself as out of office and hope that you can get to Cancri and back in your lunch break so everything looks as normal as possible. Rose walks off one way and you go the other. It'll be easier for you to go up to the right floor and get a quick cross line to Cancri's area, and by your understanding of it, you'll need to balance when you get there. Maybe you can do it in Cancri's office? You just make it into the elevator in time and pull out your palm husk to message him. Cancri, I need to have lunch with you. I'm already on the way. That's a little presumptuous of you. What if I have plans? You're right. You always are. Sincerely. But I need to talk to you. Carcat, what is this about? Say the presentation he made on Wednesday about the ship's economy, Silas hisses, though no one is going to overhear him. It's a good suggestion, though, so you go for it. I've been thinking about that talk you gave me on Wednesday about the economy, and I want to talk more with you about it. In private, in your office. Oh, yes. I can see why you would be so moved by that. My schedule is clear for us to catch up if you want. Yes, that'd be great, thanks. I'm on my way already. Oh, and you've emailed me about it, too. Wait, shit. Rose has the virus, which means it's probably already in your work machine, and then onto Cancri. You've hastily put your palm husk through the steps that Terezi showed you to isolate it from the network so you don't fuck up your palm husk, if nothing else. At least Cancri's machine didn't explode. That's something. And if you're going to be looking that hard for silver linings, then you can say that he's probably going to be aware of the whole situation with the virus getting out early. That'll speed things up. The elevator dings for your floor, and you get out and half walk, half run to the cross line with Silas following you. You have no idea how today has gone so wrong. You really don't. You rush onto the train and pause to catch your breath, and as you're doing that, you start to catch strains of conversation, of people talking about the video and the files attached. You're frozen in place as you listen. But all this stuff, I mean, things have been weird lately, but one person says. I want to say it's some prank, but it's pretty in-depth for one, another adds. No, it can't be. It's gotta be viral marketing or something, a third person argues. If it's marketing, then someone's losing their job and going to prison. This is gonna make people panic. Who'd do that for no reason? The second person points out. Oh, fuck. You're starting to see why Kanaya made a point of getting you all to consciously accept that this sort of thing could happen, that you could face serious consequences. Damn it! You hate consequences! They're the worst! Do you know what we're going to do when we get there? I presume you actually intend on going to see Cancry, Signless asks, pulling your focus back to him. Your palm husk is barely functional with the settings you have on, but you can open the Notes app just fine. That's the plan, and I guess use the privacy to do the thing? The thing. Right, you're worried about getting caught and leaving evidence. Do you know what song you'll be using? If you're planning to do this, then you probably want something more advanced than a child's song, Silas points out. You delete your text and think for a moment. Solix gave you all of that music he got from Aradia. Maybe you should try using that stuff, but then you don't know it all that well. Surely you want to sing something that you can go the whole way through the song and not have to look up lyrics or anything. That leaves you with your own library. What do you pick? Before, it was you trying to convey and soothe a feeling of doom. On the train, you were just trying to give Signless power to help, but now what? What do you sing to communicate that you understand the pain the souls trying to break through are in? You need recognition of unfairness. You scrabble in your pockets for your earphones and dredge up another old song. You found this one yourself when you were trawling Earth history. It wasn't even all that famous, but you'd been looking for something to prove your point about economic inequality on Earth close to the end. You hit repeat and start listening to it over and over, letting Signless see the screen. When it's your stop, you get off and quickly walk to Cancry's office with your digestion sac in knots. Do you feel that? Signless asks, and you subtly nod, because you do feel that awful building static of something too close that shouldn't be. Something's going to open up here. Something's going to happen, and you have to stop it. You get through a few doorways and sprint up the steps in Cancry's building to get to his office. You rap on the door once and let yourself in without waiting for him to open the door for you. You get in and shut the door immediately and lean against it in a breathless moment of relief. Cancry is standing behind his desk, and he gives you an incredibly concerned look as he turns his screen around. The captain and the administration are already aware of the virus. They're saying it's all a hoax, and whoever is behind it is to turn themselves in. That they've already got leads, and they're tracking them down. Not to mention my own machine is now infected too. Cancry tells you gravely. Fuck, you say. Normally, I'd tell you there's no need to curse, but I think in this situation you're entirely justified. Fuck indeed. Cancry nods. He walks around his desk to come to your side, a look of concern on his face. If you were only coming about the virus, it's safe to say that I know now, he says. It's not just that. The Void is doing something near here, and me and Signless need to fix it, you tell him. Signless and I, Cancry says absently. Pedant, Signless mutters, rolling his eyes, and you try not to laugh since it's hardly the time. Can I use your office to do it? Me standing on the street out there singing to myself is pretty noticeable, you ask him. I think that would definitely attract attention, you're right. Is singing all you need to do? Does the volume matter? Cancry asks. I don't think the volume matters. There's more to it than just singing, but from your point of view, yeah, that's all. You nod. Go ahead. Cancry nods and gestures to the free space of his office, cluttered though it is with dry erase boards packed with fine red lettering and detailed flowcharts. You move to the center of the room for no particular reason other than you can't think of a place that you're supposed to do this in. You more or less know the lyrics to this song enough now, but you're still going to keep one of your earphones in to help you sing along. Also, it's one ear that doesn't have to hear your own voice without any instruments or anything else, including talent and skill. You close your eyes and try to reach out mentally as before. To your surprise, you can feel where Signless is, even with your eyes shut. You draw a breath and start to nervously sing along, trying to draw out some experiences from the ghosts in the void so you can sympathize and try to lay them to rest a little. That's what you're hoping for, at least. You hit play.
Call you trailer trash. from their tiny homes. Tweet who needs cash from $1,000 phones. It's always me. I did this on my own, but they're living off of daddy's loans. Yeah, these rich kids are changing their tune.
Something stirs out there beyond you in Signless, like something else swimming in the same water that you're in. You keep going, trying to attach the song to the experiences that Signless had, as if to point to the idea that you do empathize and he knows what it's like. You hear Signless's noise of quiet amusement. You reach your free hand out and move it through the air that feels somehow thicker to the touch, and you imagine that the void's ghosts are flitting through it like now extinct fish as you try to change the currents.
They wear diamonds with your broken glass. They wear diamonds with your broken glass. Yeah, these rich kids are
Something moves against your touch, something closer and more powerful than the time you were in the shower. It surges against you, a full wave of psychic feelings compared to the currents that tried to drag you outside the sailor bar. This is so much more real. You persist because you fear that if you don't keep moving through this, then you'll drown. You try to reason with the maelstrom around you. Surely so many of them suffered needlessly, went without when there was no reason for them to. One truth you've had to come to grips with as you've gotten older is that no matter how nice people can be one-on-one, there's always people out there who will try to put other people down to lift themselves up. They hide it by not seeing the faces of those people, saying it's just business or politics. It's not personal. They did nothing wrong. Your ship is protected from a lot of it, given how no one can ever be homeless or without food and healthcare on your ship, but people can still hurt each other. You know it's true, you've seen it. So you try to reason with the torrent of the void around you. You understand. These people who were alive before you suffered from that dark streak that lingers at least a little in everyone's soul, though for some it's less of a mark and more the background color of their entire worldview. It's awful and you get that, but it's in the past, and unless the afterlife is about to be deeply disappointing, their future is free of that. They're free of that, if only they can let it go. The static of it all tightens around you, angry and clawing. You're not saying let it go like it's easy. Of course it's not. It's not fair that they have to heal from something that someone else did to them, that a system did to them. You're not saying shit like be positive, all things pass, or any of that other trite hoofbeat shit. All you're saying is that they can be mad and spit on the memory of people who wronged them and then leave it behind. Don't let those people get every part of you. They don't deserve that. Signless reaches through everything to you, and for a second you get flickers of Alternia in your mind. Not even visions, just impressions of gross inequality. You feel the contrast of ground-to-the-bone suffering in an attempt to have even the most basic things covered, and then gaudy, opulent, and hideous displays of wealth like it wasn't only natural but practically divine right. You keep singing and find a resonant harmony in Signless that starts to lower the brightness of everything around you bit by bit.
Out here gagging on those silver spoons. Out here choking on those silver spoons. If I did it, so can you. Out here gagging on those silver spoons.
The brightness around you fades, and you don't know if it's receding or if you just can't see it now that you're not singing. Signless turns his head a little as if he's listening for something. That helped, I think. It doesn't feel like everything is about to rip open now, Signless says after a moment. Did it work? Cancry asks over the end of Signless's sentence because, of course, he can't hear him. I think it worked. Yeah, thanks, you say with a sigh and slump against the wall. You sounded quite nice, actually. I don't remember if I ever heard you sing at home, Cancry says after a moment. You open your eyes and see Cancry, really see him. He was such a present figure in your life when you were a kid, and even when he moved out, he was still around a lot and tangled up with you. Your relationship was never great when you were younger, and even as you got older, it wasn't much better. When you started your career, you were defensive that Cancry didn't see you as a qualified person doing a job, but still as his dumb kid ancestor. He didn't engender much empathy on your end at that point either. The longer you did your job, the more you were able to come to some kind of professional understanding with him, but he was still your older ancestor, Cancry. You were both set in these roles, relating to each other the same way you had since you had learned to talk. At some point, though, he grew up, and so did you. You don't think either of you had noticed it until this whole thing started, where everything got so shook up that you really saw each other. Or maybe he saw you first, since he came to you and not the other way around. He's family, and now that you're both adults, you both get to decide what you want that relationship to be. You're grateful that it's this.
Thanks, you say quietly.
I think, Cancry says, and fusses with his clothes a little, that we should try to lay low and keep an eye out for what the captain and her people are going to do. We can say you had lunch with me. That's a perfectly fine alibi, but you should probably go back to your office and... A buzzer on his desk goes off and makes you jump. Cancry walks to it and holds a finger up to remind you to keep quiet and to, in a way, pause the conversation that you'd been having. Hello? He says, pressing a button.
Mr. Ventus, there's some officers here. They want to talk to you. I tried to get them to wait, but they just rushed past me. If there's anything confidential that you need to get off of your desk, then you probably should, a voice says from the other end.
Thank you, Cancry says, and takes his finger off of the button.
What do I do?
You hiss at him. There's a fire escape connected to the next room over. If you open that window there, you should be able to jump to it and get out, Cancry says with cool composure. Cancry walks to the window quickly, and you go to follow him.
How far are we talking?
You ask in a hushed voice. Cancry opens the window from the bottom up and looks out of it before casually stepping away. There are officers outside who were definitely watching me, Cancry says, and your blood pressure drops. You look at Cancry, whose face is a picture of cool composure. After a second, he meets your eye and nods. Hide behind the desk. I will try to keep them outside. If I can get them to leave, then you can wait a minute and leave that way. If not, I'll have to distract them. If it comes to that, I will get them to radio for those officers down there, and when they leave, you get out the window and run. Signless can look out of there without being seen and tell you if they've gone, so you know when to go, I assume. Cancry tells you. I can do that. Signless nods.
What? But...
You start, and Cancry shakes his head. This is not the time for debate, Cancry says, for possibly the first time in his life. He puts a hand on your shoulder and pushes you to the floor behind his desk. He's already walking to the door when there's a knock. Cancry opens the door, and you hear him move into the doorway, blocking entry to the room.
Cancry Ventus?
A woman's voice asks. Yes, what can I help you with, officer? Cancry asks. Have you seen your ancestor lately? A man's voice asks. May I ask what this is about? Cancry says. You know it's a question, but his tone is so flat that it could easily not be.
We have reason to believe that this virus that's spreading around these fake files came from your ancestor, so have you seen him? The woman asks again. There are several points to be addressed there. Firstly, whether I have or have not seen Karkat is neither here nor there. I do not need to divulge any part of my personal life just because you're law enforcement and happen to ask. The second question I want to raise is, what evidence exactly do you have that implicates my ancestor, and has it been in fact verified that these files are indeed false? Cancry questions them back. There's a stunned pause. We're here on official police, the man begins angrily. Do you have a warrant? Cancry interrupts him. There is a pause, or at least enough of a pause that Cancry decides to keep talking. From your experience, you know that doesn't need to be long. No, I didn't think that you did. Which means I am under no legal obligation to tell you anything. Furthermore, you have done nothing to settle my concerns about these files at all, and let me tell you, I've seen them and I find them deeply unsettling, Cancry says primly. You hear a few doors opening. Cancry's getting an audience. It's not like he's yelling right now, but you and Cancry both have the ability to project your voice, regardless of volume. No doubt everyone up and down the hall can hear all of this. This is a matter of ship-wide security, the woman snaps. Then it should be of no trouble for you to follow the proper legal procedures, then, Cancry retorts. We don't have time for... The woman starts, but Cancry is in there already. You don't have time for respecting the legal rights of this ship's citizens? Are our legally protected rights out of the window the moment you decide they are? That is not law or justice, and that is frankly appalling. Do you hear this? Cancry asks, presumably of someone else out there.
Signless is alternating between looking out of the window and looking at Cancry with an expression of both amusement and pride on his face. "Why don't we step in your office and talk?" the man suggests. "Why don't you leave and get a warrant? Or do you benefit from me being out of view of witnesses? If there is something you have to say, then you can say it here, or, as I mentioned previously, you can leave and come back when you have a warrant," Cancry says, his voice a little louder now. "We tracked his palm husk to this area before we lost the signal again. How do we know he's not in your office? If you have nothing to hide, then show us," the man says, with a note of threat in his voice. "Wait, they couldn't have tracked you all the way here. You made your palm husk secure like Teresley showed you. Have they been in your chat logs? Or in Cancry's? They definitely can't have gone through the proper legal channels for that." "I could have my Lucis tap dancing on my desk, and it would still be none of your concern without you having proper legal grounds to search my office, which you absolutely do not. And for your sake, I hope I misheard you, because the idea that the innocent have nothing to hide and only the guilty demand warrants is both an absurd idea and quite honestly horrifying. I invite you to try again." Cancry scoffs at them. "I think you're acting very suspiciously. You clearly have something to hide," the man hisses. "Officers of the law threatening me, implying they're going to arrest me simply for asking for the legal papers to question me or search my private office. Your conduct is disgusting, and you should be ashamed. I will be making a report to your supervisor the moment that you cease to darken my door. And how dare you imply that I am guilty of anything without one shred of proof, or my ancestor for that matter? If you want to talk about reasonable suspicion, I think we ought to be talking about this leaked information that implies that our captain has lied to all of us. Your brutish behavior in an effort to silence people you think are involved with this speaks volumes that you have chosen to serve not the people but simply power instead. I do not respect your authority, what little of it there is right now, and honestly, I'm starting to not recognize you as an authority with any legitimacy at all if this is how you see fit to conduct yourselves in such a time." Cancry lectures them, at a volume that'd make you think they were in the next building and he was trying to reach them through yelling alone. You can hear other voices murmuring down the hallway. "Hell fucking yes!" Signless hisses with glee as he watches Cancry. "You can answer our questions here, or you can do it at the station," the woman snarls at him. "I will not be threatened! Leave! Now!" Cancry yells at her. "Gladly, and you're coming with us. But we'll be searching your office first," the man says meanly. "You have no legal authority to do that, and I warn you that I will defend myself from your invasion and infringements on my rights, but I am telling you to leave. Your search and your questions are unlawful, and I have plenty of witnesses to confirm that." Cancry barks back at him. "You should go!" someone else down the hall shouts. "Enough of this! Come— Ah!" The woman's voice breaks off in a scream. You hear the scuff of feet on the floor and a body hitting the doorframe, and then a sickening thud and someone gasping for air. You move on instinct, ready to fight anyone willing to lay a hand on Cancry, but Signless holds his hands up in front of your face. "Stay put," Signless orders you. "I really didn't want to do that. I'm a pacifist by nature. I far prefer reason and reform. But there are times when talk is not enough, and one must physically defend oneself and others from tyranny and oppression. No, thank you!" Cancry cuts himself off as you hear someone's feet move quickly on the floor, followed by a loud oof and another thud on the ground. "I think you had better leave," Cancry says politely, and clicks the door shut behind him, shutting himself in the hallway. "The ones outside are moving," Signless says with a look outside. "But they'll arrest him. He can't fight that many people. I didn't know he could fight at all," you hiss at Signless. "He's a Vantis. When it comes to it, he takes a stand. He made his choice, and he chose to do this to spare you, so you need to follow through on that plan. When you're safely out, I can follow him for you and tell you what's going on, but you have to go," Signless tells you firmly. You sniff and check that you have all of your things with you. If they do search Cancry's office, you don't want to leave more evidence behind. With that done, you try to steel your nerves and crouch walk to the window. You climb onto the windowsill just as you hear voices down the hall shout Cancry's name. You focus on the fire escape and jump. You land clumsily, but you run to the next hallway and glance back. There's no police behind you or below you, and Signless is floating by the open window. He nods at you and slips inside. You run. You take care to be out of the public eye. You hide anything that could obviously identify you. You end up down some side street with almost no foot traffic as you try to work out what the fuck you're supposed to do now. The police have you as a suspect. They're firm enough that you did this, that they sent people after you and tried to arrest Cankry. They probably have arrested Cankry. Cankry, who just assaulted 2 police officers to save your ass. You're pretty sure he must have busted some part of the woman's face, judging by how she sounded, and whatever he did to the other guy left him in a heap on the floor. You had no idea he was even capable of anything like that. Signless said that Ventuses make a stand when it comes down to it. Cankry made his, but what do? You can't go back to your work like nothing is wrong. You'll be caught. You can't go home, that's too obvious. You can't go to anyone else who was involved or else you risk incriminating them. You've been scared this whole time, but complete, screaming, hysterical fear is starting to grip you now. You should get far away from Cankry's office, but everywhere you go, you risk being seen. Your ship is big, but it's self-contained, and there's cameras in most businesses, public areas, all of the transport, and even in the elevators. You're effectively stuck. You find a little hiding spot behind some structural support between 2 buildings and silently panic. Why didn't you think about this eventuality? Stupid! You stare helplessly at your palm husk. It's functionally useless now, and even if you did disable things to message someone for help, there isn't anything they could do, and you'd get caught right away. Cold fear sluices down your back and you freeze. That felt like outside fear. The space between the 2 buildings leaves you a narrow gap to see the street beyond. Figures pass occasionally, but you swear you felt... Oh. There's a dark shape, cut out in shadow against the light of the street beyond. Long limbs, wild hair, and tall horns. Gamzee. He walks towards you, and you're helpless to do anything but wait, your palm husk held in a vice grip in your hand. He approaches you without making a sound, his footsteps imperceptible. As Gamzee reaches you, he looks down at you. His eyes are wide and bloodshot, with dark circles underneath that speak of how little sleep he's had. "How did you find me?" you whisper. Gamzee blinks slowly and sighs. "They said you've been doing treasonous shit. Had someone tell me that they'd tracked you to Cankry. I could feel your fear from here," he says. The 2 of you stare at each other in silence. "I know it's all true," you whisper, clutching onto your palm husk like a lifeline. "Gamzee, I know about the balance, about all of it. What they did to you all isn't right. I had to do something. If they can't deny it, and if everyone knows, then they can't use that secrecy against you," you insist. "You don't know shit," Gamzee growls, his volume low, but still very obviously pissed off. "I do, though," you say. You reach out and call for Signless, and in an instant he appears. For a split second, he's obviously surprised at the change of scenery, and then catches sight of Gamzee. "This seems like a bad idea," Signless says quietly. For the first time, you get to see another living person see Signless, and you have to say that Gamzee looks surprised as fuck. "What the fuck?" he whispers. "What the..." Gamzee starts again, and you clap your hand over his mouth before that becomes an ear-splitting and very conspicuous yell. "The night before Father died, Reader came to me and told me everything. I'd been dreaming about Signless before, and then it changed, and he's here all the time now. They told me to keep Signless away from you because your ancestor is still a fucking murder machine. They said I had to keep it from you because if you knew, he'd know. So, yeah, I know," you hiss at him. "You're the one who's been fucking with the balance," Gamzee says slowly. "I've been trying to do what Father was doing, but Reader didn't give me much to go on. I've been trying to help," you say. "Help? You think you were motherfucking helping?" Gamzee hisses at you. "I did my best with the information I had," you say defensively. "You..." Gamzee backs up a step and covers his face with his hands, and you see his thin chest shift as he breathes deeply. "Gotta calm down or he'll come back." You mean your ancestor, right?" you ask, glancing around to see if just mentioning him was enough to bring him here. Thankfully, it seems like it isn't enough to do that. Gamzee takes his hands from his face and gives you one of those unblinking looks again that makes you feel he can see right through your think pan and into your think sponge. You didn't tell me. That time on the lounge plank when the light went out, you knew, Gamzee says darkly.
Not then. That was right before. Father was still alive then. Fuck, that was a shitty way to go. I didn't need to see that final destination shit, but I couldn't leave Raider to fade away alone. So, no, I didn't have Signless then. I was only seeing him in my dreams, but I'd started figuring some of this shit out with the balance and everything.
You explain. You didn't tell me any of that, Gamzee accuses you.
I had planned to tell you everything as soon as the others got back. I get why you couldn't tell me all this time. The captain kept you silent, and it sounds like crazy talk. I get that. After Reader told me how important it was to keep your ancestor away from mine, I couldn't tell you in case he overheard or made you tell him.
You tell Gamzee insistently. You knew Reader for all of, what, a day and trusted them over me? Gamzee demands, and you can feel voodoo starting to leak off of him, making your breath catch in your chest.
Is your Moirail using chuckle voodoos on you?
Signless asks in an appalled tone.
He doesn't mean it.
You hiss at him and quickly look back at Gamzee.
You don't know what they told me or what I saw. You don't know what I found out. I don't know what the captain told you to get you to do your job. Neither of us acted fantastically here, but you're still my Moirail, aren't you?
Your certainty falters, and your own fear fills your chest as you stare up at Gamzee's face.
Gamzee, say something,
you whisper, sick with dread as a deep ache sets into your chest. You don't even know what you've done, what kind of evils you've unleashed on everyone. You just let your virus loose, Gamzee starts.
In my defense, I didn't set the virus loose. That wasn't me, and it wasn't supposed to happen yet. It wasn't meant to go out until just before everyone got back. And not everything that got out was meant to go out. We were trying to be careful.
You insist. Careful doesn't mean shit when you don't have a goddamn clue about any of this. It's dangerous. Gamzee snaps at you.
I know it is. I know the void is dangerous. I've seen what it does. This morning, the train I was on nearly got taken. If we hadn't stopped it, that would have been it.
You tell him. A look of horror crosses Gamzee's face as he processes the idea that you could have died. You know what that'd mean for him. Another person he loves, dead where he couldn't help.
I'm fine, really. I'm fine. Shoosh.
You whisper, reaching out for him, but not quite touching him just yet. It's not motherfucking fine. Shit is already out of control, and you're trying to wake up the whole goddamn ship. That can't happen. You don't know what goes down when everyone knows, but I do, Gamzee says darkly.
Have you seen Dr. Lalonde's research? The experiment that Dave's mom did to see what happened where everyone knows?
You ask him. Dave told me all about it. Same with everyone who came before us, Gamzee says, still staring you down.
Okay, well, I actually saw everything about her experiment, what she wanted to do and how she did it. Her experiment got cut down from ships our size to 2 that held about 200 people each, and they weren't regular people, they were prisoners. Nothing in that experiment means anything. It wasn't repeated, it wasn't comparable, and even she said it was meaningless and no one should read anything into it. That's what I know about this.
You argue. What? No, Dave... Gamzee starts.
Dave was a kid, one of her test subjects no less. Of course he got told that. They wanted him to perform for their tests, and saying that if he told anyone they could die is a perfect way to isolate him. He probably doesn't know any better, and the same thing happened to you. You couldn't even tell me any of this because they let you think that shit. The captain did that. She's in on this whole thing. She even took in one of Lalonde's test subjects. You snarl, livid with anger at the injustice of it all.
No, that's not right, Gamzee says with a shake of his head, but he sounds uncertain.
It's true. I'm telling you. The captain took one of her test subjects, so she was part of this whole program. What was her name? Sil something?
You say, the name on the tip of your tongue. Silum? Gamzee says in shock.
Yes, that's her. Had a substance abuse problems thanks to all the trauma from Lalonde's studies and died. Like I said, the captain took her in, so she was part of this whole messed up scheme.
You nod. Gamzee's gaze finally drops. He's not pinning you in place with the force of his eye contact any longer. Instead, he looks uncertain and lost. He shakes his head slightly and looks back at you, his expression ill at ease. Why would the captain lie to us about that shit? She doesn't want anyone on the ship dying. She's trying to keep people alive. She saw her planet die. She'd do anything to stop that kind of thing happening again, Gamzee says. And she did. Individual people can make stupid decisions when they're afraid, but a group of people can be pretty easily controlled by fear. Tell people they can lose everything by not complying and make sure they know you mean it, and people will do anything. Signless says, his tone tainted with bitter first-hand experience. He said he thinks she was keeping you afraid to control you. I mean, if balancers have all this power over the void, then it makes sense she'd want to control you. Us. I'm just speculating here, but I'm telling you that the experiment that Lalonde did didn't prove anything. But I saw that the captain was putting you all in this position and keeping you isolated, that we were all being lied to. I had to tell everyone. I had to. But now I'm stuck here and I don't know what to do. She's exploiting you, all of you. She would have done it to me if she'd found out about me, but now she'll probably space me or throw me to some mad scientist like Lalonde. Shit, fuck. You curse out and cover your face with your free hand. Gamzee is staring at you, unblinkingly, like he's broken or something. She wants anyone responsible taken in. She wants to try to undo all of this, save what she can. They've worked out it was your virus, Gamzee says. It's not a threat, just plainly said statements. It's still pretty threatening all the same, though. You can't run. There's nowhere you can hide that they won't find you. You're stuck. I'm not going to fight you or run from you, Gamzee. I couldn't stand by and do nothing. So what are you going to do? You ask him quietly. There's not more than a foot of space between the two of you, but the unreadable and closed-off expression on his face makes you feel like it could be a million miles. Maybe it's ironic, but this is also more than the two of you have spoken in quite some time, and at least you were both honest, neither of you keeping any dark secrets any longer. Gamzee, say something, you plead, your voice barely above a whisper. Gamzee looks at you and grits his teeth. When he breathes in deeply a moment later, you can see those very sharp teeth on display for a split second. Your ancestor died fighting for what was right. You don't know how many mutants or lowbloods tried to resist or rebel before him. Certainly, death was nothing new for your species before the apocalypse. You wonder how many mutants and lowbloods have stood before a highblood like Gamzee, awaiting judgment with nowhere else to go. If you have to hand me over, I understand. You're trying to protect people too, and I've fucked things up a lot. Honestly, I don't even know what other choice you have here, but I was trying to help. Not just the ship, but you. I get why you couldn't tell me. I don't blame you for that. I'm sorry we couldn't talk about all this before now. I wish I could have helped you. You say softly. The vents, Gamzee says. What? You say, entirely nonplussed at that response to what you'd said. There's ventilation in the ship, but there's spaces between things too, shit from when they built this place. They needed to be able to get about between things, and most of it got filled with cleaning drone tubes, wiring, and ventilation, but not all. You can get real far in them. He used to use them to fuck with people's heads without being seen. Still does. Gamzee elaborates. I can see that being a way to get out of this exact spot, but what then? I can't live in some little crawl space forever, you point out. You're not spending the rest of your life in some vent, people watching like some goddamn weirdo. When Dave and Aradia get back, we'll figure something out. You just stay hidden until then, Gamzee says and looks around. He paces down between the two buildings a little bit before finding a spot. He crouches down and pulls a multi-tool thing out of his pocket and pops a panel in the floor open. You walk over and cringe back at the dark recessed space that really doesn't look all that big at all. I can't stay in there for almost a week, you hiss at him. Don't have to. Your shit canceled the mission. They're already on their way back. Gamzee says with a shrug, like he didn't just dump the weight of hundreds of thousands of carapacian souls on your shoulders. You stare at the hole in the floor, and for a moment you're reminded of the trench that Fazer's body dropped into before he was buried under so much loose earth. What about the others? I had help, you say, carefully and vaguely. Gamzee gives you a look and a gesture that pretty much indicates that he can't put people into a vent if they're not here, and also possibly that he doesn't care as much about whoever helped you. Trust me, Gamzee says simply. You look at your Moirel. He could turn you in. You've been meddling in shit you weren't meant to and you lied to him, but he's not doing that. Despite all of your differences and how your relationship has been going, even then, you trust him enough to not seal you in a hole in the floor to die. It's not exactly a huge, sweeping declaration of trust for your Moirel, and that should be standard with pretty much any relationship of any kind. But he is your Moirel. You nod and take his hand. He helps you into the empty space and then hands you his little multi-tool. You sit down and then lay back as Gamzee kneels down and lowers the floor plate as he goes. You see one last sliver of his face before he slots the plate back in place. Without the tool he gave you, he has to bang it for a second to get it to click, and then you're alone in the dark. Signless phases through the floor and gives you a concerned look. He's basically the only thing you can see right now, and you're trying not to panic. They arrested Cancri, and you're in a hole in the ground, Signless says. Not helping, you hiss at him and roll onto your front. It's not so tight in here that you can't roll over, but it's more enclosed than you'd like. Really, you'd like not at all to be how enclosed you are in a hole in the ground, but that chance has passed. You blink in the dark and wait as your eyes adjust to the dark. Your species was nocturnal on Alternia, but that was mostly dim at night rather than fully dark. Even so, it means that you've got decent night vision after about a minute or so of letting your eyes adjust. You look around and spot a place further ahead in what looks like the main street that's a little bit more open. You awkwardly crawl and wiggle your way through there, and then around a little more until you can find a place with a little more height that's probably in part of the wall or some structure. Once you get there, you can sit up and try to think. Can you go and check on everyone else and tell me what's going on with them? I'll stay here, you whisper to Signless. All right, he nods, and then he's gone. You wait in the dark for what feels like 1,000,000 hours, and in that time, you have time to think. At first, you burn through a big chunk of time blaming yourself for what's happening, for wondering how your plan got so utterly fucked up. When you get to the point of wondering that, you have to pause. Hal, Roxy, and Dirk were handling the virus side of things, and they said they could deal with that. They're computer geniuses, and Hal said he had Solix's notes or whatever on your virus. Or was it his report on it? Because if it was Solix's report of how your virus worked and what he did to stop it, what to look out for should it happen again, then that might be a problem. You know Solix lied about your virus to keep you out of deep trouble. If he neglected to mention the worst and trickiest parts of your virus, then the Striders might not have realized what they were dealing with. Your code was always such nonsense that even Solix had a hard time figuring out how you managed to make it do the things it did. So, if they went off of a bullshit report he made, then your virus wouldn't have been well behaved like they wanted it to be. Oh no. This is partly your fault, but you're pretty sure some blame is going to be laid at Solix's feet for lying for you. They're gonna drag him into this. Hell, they might accuse him of being part of this whole thing and setting it up to go off while he was away to make him look innocent. Unlike you, he can't plead that he's too incompetent to have done something like that. If they're going after Cancri out of fear and an attempt to control this thing, then they'll more than likely go after Solix too. Which means that you need to get to him first. You wait for Signless to come back, and when he does, it's not with good news. The Strider family is in police custody, as is Cancri. Kanaya is somewhere else. I couldn't find her, but if she's anything like Mom, I bet she's putting up a fight. I think you're the only one still free, Signless tells you grimly. Fuck. Okay. I need to get to the shuttle bay, and you're gonna help me get there, you tell Signless. But That's more than halfway across the ship, and that's the very bottom, and you're way higher up, Signless says in surprise. And if I don't get there in time, Solix is going to get caught too. I'm not going to sit here doing nothing. I don't care how many miles of ventilation crawl space I have to drag myself through. You tell him firmly. You look at Signless, and after a moment, he points his finger ahead of you. You nod and start moving. This is going to take a while.